cleaner and nicer than mine.
And he's probably taking out some trees right now.
Yeah, all right, guys. We just got a special delivery. That's right, guys. We are adding another second box truck to the Techno Barbarian workshop / garage. We've got our first client build here. This was just shipped from Florida. Just got it off the truck. Now we're gonna get it in the backyard.
Yeah, it definitely does not.
We have to take that out.
Yeah, we do.
We're doing our first modification truck here. Taking this second-hand mirror off. Won't fit through my paint. Yeah, I see it now.
Just a couple of shingles.
Yeah, but
Clear.
we're not going to get an HOA notice. They had some kind of rack in here, it looks like. It looks smaller when there's nothing in it. It's weird.
So I'd already been communicating with the client for several weeks at this point. We already had a whole design built out, ready to go. It was just a matter of kind of translating that onto paper and then communicating the plan to my brother here, who was doing the camera work and staying with me for a while. He was actually going to be contributing a lot to this build. You're actually not really going to see me at all for the rest of this video. So all the basic stuff in terms of the framing, getting everything kind of to the blank slate stage where it's ready to be built in, is going to be handled primarily by him. And I figured it's easy enough to do if you don't have the experience to kind of explain what needs to be done for this stuff and then kind of get to work. I was still finishing the Murphy bed in my own truck at this point, so it was good timing. So for the rest of the video, I'm going to be focusing on the stuff that I did differently, the stuff that I'm changing in this build that I did differently from my build. The first one of that is adding soundproofing to the ceiling. So the actual difference that this made was insane compared to having no soundproofing on the ceiling. And I think if you're doing a build like this box truck, if you have aluminum walls or aluminum ceiling like the U-Haul does, it's only aluminum on the ceiling, and the U-Haul's the box is wood itself. So the soundproofing on the walls that I did, pretty much completely pointless. Soundproofing on the ceiling, on the other hand, that is a massive reduction in sound anytime you're dealing with rain, especially. It rained quite a bit during the filming of this video, and we were able to, you could hear drastically the difference just standing underneath where those soundproofing panels were versus no soundproofing panels. And we put them in that specific location because that's where the sleeping quarters is going to be. So we have everything mapped out in terms of where the rooms are going to be, the different components inside the truck, and we're going to be putting framing specifically around the edges to support the walls, but also specifically where, again, walls or different components are going to be, so that we have something to fasten to rather than just going into only the OSB on the floor, because we are going to be using OSB as the subfloor here. Similar to my first build, we're going to be using 2x4s that have been ripped to exactly 2 inches in width, standing them up on edge so that they match the depth of the 2-inch insulation that we're going to be putting in the floor itself. Gives us a nice flush surface to attach that OSB to eventually. And that framing is being fastened with a combination of PL3X adhesive straight to the floor, but we're also using some screws to fasten those into the walls as well. As you guys well know, I like to kind of take my builds to the next level in terms of not only quality, technology, but also creativity and the kind of components that we're putting inside of it. Now, this build is going to be no exception to that rule. If anything, we're going to be kind of pushing it to the next level. This is actually going to be a toy hauler. That's right. We're going to be building this box truck out to not only be stealth, but also to be a travel container for a motorcycle. So that was a big consideration with this framing here. We need to actually build out some framing in the floor that's going to be able to kind of support some mounting points for the motorcycle once that's actually stored in the back of the truck. Another significant change with this build is not necessarily due to choice per se, but more so due to necessity. We're going to be using the 2-inch foamular pink insulation rather than the 2-inch polyiso white insulation, which does have a little bit higher R value, but there are pros and cons to this pink stuff as well. First of all, it's a lot denser, it's more rigid, it holds loads a lot better, so it doesn't compress as much, which means it's going to be a lot better in our floors and in our walls to actually support those. It's a lot easier to cut, it's a lot easier to work with, it doesn't make as much of a mess, but the polyiso was simply not available. We looked everywhere within 500 miles of Houston, and we could not find any retail outlets that carried 2-inch polyiso. We even looked at specialty build stores, mom and pop shops. Couldn't find it. There's 1-inch available, but for 2-inch insulation at this point, in terms of our region anyway, looks like the foamular is the only way to go. Cutting a channel through the floor here for the PEX pipe. We're going to run from one side to the other for the shower and the sink, since they're going to be on opposite sides here. We're using the standard OSB subfloor for this build, but before we actually fasten it to the framing with screws, we're going to go through and apply some spray foam underneath there so that any gaps get filled, making sure that our floor doesn't flex at all, but it also kind of acts as an adhesive, keeping everything stuck together, kind of a second layer of fastening on top of the screws that we apply. The other thing I'm doing different here with the floor is that we've cut our channel for the PEX piping early during the actual floor installation rather than coming back and doing it later. So at this point we can go ahead and run that PEX pipe through before we fasten in that floor panel above it. At this point, it's really just kind of rinse and repeat. We're going to follow the same process on the walls that we did with the floor. We have the full layout already ready to go, so we're going to put the framing exactly where we need it, and then we're going to fill in all spaces with insulation foam. I feel it's worth mentioning at this point that for those of you who might be wondering why we're kind of just blowing through the flooring, the ceiling, the walls, the insulation, the framing, all in one short video, it's because I've already done all this stuff once before in my previous build series. So there's nothing too extravagantly different in what we're doing here, aside from the things that I'm actually pointing out to you here in the voiceover. But if you want to get more detailed walkthroughs and how to do that wall framing, the insulation, the rationale behind why I made certain decisions, well, you can either, of course, message me on my technobarbarian.locals.com private community page. You can message me there, or you could just go back and watch the original build series, which is, of course, on my YouTube channel. One of the key lessons that I've learned in my U-Haul is that most of the heat comes in through the ceiling, because that's the only real metal part that's ever exposed to any kind of heat. During the day, that sun just beats on that roof, even if you have solar panels that can just conduct right through the ceiling, through that aluminum panels, and get into your living space. So I opted to go the extra mile with this one, try a new strategy where we're going to coat the entire roof in a roof rubber coating. It's a little bit of a redundant sentence there, but the point is we're applying a thick reflective insulative property to the ceiling so that that sunlight just reflects straight off rather than absorbing into the roof. We measured some massive differences in temperature before and after this stuff was applied, so I think this is actually probably the single biggest thing that any U-Haul owner could do to make the environment more thermally efficient. Just to give you an idea of how dramatic that temperature change was, Without that coating on the top in the midday in Houston, we weren't even able to really hold our hand to that ceiling from the inside. It was so hot. After we applied that roof coating, we could actually come inside, and the ceiling itself was cool to the touch. Not only was it not hot, it was cool to the touch. So imagine how much, as it's sitting out there in the sun all day, that heat is just kind of leaking out into your living area. One thing that I really hated working with in my U-Haul was the curved roof. That really made a lot of the construction inside very difficult, from the kitchen cabinets to the wall framing for the bathrooms. And I decided this time around, not only for simplicity's sake, but also for aesthetics, that we're going to work with the flat ceiling here. So we're adding some 2x4s to the middle of the ribbed ceiling in the U-Haul, and also some 2x4s on the edges, so that we have not only a 90-degree angle to work with on the corners, but we have a flat, level surface all the way across, so we can attach our eventual ceiling panels too. And we are screwing these directly into the ribs. So those ribs are about an inch deep, so you got a little bit of room to work with if you want to put some pocket holes, some screws into those ribs and use those as any kind of structural framing. And for those of you keeping track, yes, this will indeed remove about 1 additional inch of headroom from the ceiling. But unless you're even taller than me, somewhere around 6'4", this will definitely not be an issue. As we wrap up the first of many videos coming for this new truck build, just want to give a shout out to my brother. He did some pretty great work on this. I didn't need to micromanage him at all throughout the process, and so far this thing is turning out to be even nicer than my build. I actually found myself getting kind of jealous at the increase in quality that's going into this truck over mine, but I guess that's kind of the whole point, right? The first one is always going to be the prototype. Every one after that is going to get a little bit better. So guys, if you want to follow the build, follow me on technobarbarian.locals.com. We've got a community over there of people building their own box truck conversions. So if you're doing your own, or you want more information on it, or maybe you're interested in looking at it, go ahead and sign up over there, technobarbarian.locals.com. You can direct message me with any kind of questions or comments you've got over there. Shout out to everyone who made it this far into the video. Let me know what you guys want to see in the comments in this new video series.